Today we're going to explore a simple embroidery technique that can be used to create text in your embroidered art. This is a beginner tutorial. I'm keeping it really simple today so that you can learn the basics of the stitch, the back stitch, and then in future tutorials and videos I'll start to do more complicated things. I'll link those videos into the description below, and if you're interested then you can watch those, and if you just want to learn how to do the basics of the back stitch today for text, then you can keep watching this and then you'll have that knowledge for those future videos. If you'd like to follow along with me, then you will need a piece of fabric, some embroidery thread, an embroidery needle, a pencil or a piece of tailor's chalk, and an embroidery hoop, although the embroidery hoop is optional. You're also going to need a pair of scissors to cut your thread, but I forgot to take a photograph of that. Sorry! First things first, you're going to need an idea of what you would like your text to say. It could be as simple as your initials or your name, which I'm going to be doing today, or you could make this more advanced by choosing a quote that means something to you, something that's going to motivate and inspire you in your creative space when it's finished. I'm going to be doing some quotes and things in the future, so you can look forward to those videos if you're interested. But for today, I'm teaching you the basics. I'm just going to do my name. Find a font that you like the look of. I've got a few fonts here, but I'm going to choose this one because I like the sort of the curves of this font and the flow of this font. If you have a printer, you can print this off and copy it. And if your fabric is thin enough, you may be able to simply trace it. Otherwise, you could hold it against a window, like I'm doing here, to use a transfer technique. If you don't have a printer, just try and copy it as best you can. Look for how the letters connect and where the lines are thicker and thinner. You won't get it exactly the same, but you will have your own personal interpretation of that font, and that actually makes it more unique. Start by tracing or transferring the text onto your fabric using pencils or tailor's chalk. Make sure that you do this very lightly so it is barely visible. It's time to grab your embroidery hoop if you have one. Separate the hoops and place the fabric onto the inner hoop. Slot the outer hoop over the top and use the screw to tighten it. Gently pull the edges of the fabric so it has a drum-like tension. Now you need to select some embroidery thread. Make sure that you use embroidery thread that is about 30 centimeters long and no longer. This is for health and safety. If you are going to be working in an environment with lots of other people sewing, you don't want to be reaching out with a long piece of thread and poking them with a needle. That's not going to make you very popular. When I'm threading a needle, I make sure that I hold it between my thumb and index finger, and I make sure that it is freshly cut so it's got a crisp edge. Makes it much easier to thread. Before I sew, I make sure that I've tied a knot in the end of the thread so that it doesn't come all the way through the fabric. To do a back stitch, you come up through the fabric from the back so that your knot is on the back, and then you come forward and go back down through the fabric. Pull your thread all the way through the fabric carefully, and then come forward. Notice how there is a gap between the first stitch and the second stitch. Bring your thread back to where the last stitch ended. This is why the back stitch is called the back stitch, because you go back into where the last stitch ended. It's a little bit like the hokey cokey in the fact that you go forwards and backwards. Forwards, leaving a gap, and backwards, filling the gap. Now you just need to keep stitching in this way, going forwards and backwards, following that line that you've drawn as precisely as you can. Your work might not look as neat on the back as it does on the front with the back stitch, but it's the front of your fabric that matters the most. So make sure that you stay close to that line that you've drawn. On curves you might need to do shorter stitches. When you've finished your letter, or when you've run out of thread, you need to turn your fabric to the back and you need to tie a knot in the end of your thread. This will stop it from coming undone. those threads loose so that it's as neat as you can make it, and don't forget to tie a knot in the end of your thread before you start sewing again. I'm just doing a little full stop here using a single stitch. There's another option here. You'll notice I've not turned it to the back to tie a knot. I've just done a diagonal line at the back of my fabric from the full stop to the second letter P. When I hold the fabric at certain angles, you can see that diagonal line, but when it's against a wall and the light isn't coming through it, you won't be able to see that, so I don't mind. And I'm doing the same thing again here. I'm using the back stitch to follow all of the letters, and I'm going to continue to do this until I've got all of my letters. Don't forget to tie a knot when you get to the end of your letter or when you're running out of thread. Now at this point I am running out of thread. As you can see, it's a very short piece of thread, so I've got some longer thread here. I got a new piece and I'm continuing to follow those letters. Backstitch is a really useful stitch because you can use it for lettering like we are doing here, but you can also use it to do drawings and things like that as well. So if you've got a drawing that you would like to copy into a piece of embroidery, you just need to draw it out lightly with pencil and follow it with a backstitch. The backstitch gives a really nice solid line that looks like a pencil line. I think I'm going to do some things like this in future as well. I'm going to do some inspirational quotes because I kind of feel like I need that in my working space to keep me going. But I think I'd also like to do some copies of some drawings that I've done in the past as well, just to give them a new lease of life. There you go, I've written my initials using a backstitch, and hopefully you've learned a new embroidery technique. If you'd like to learn some more embroidery techniques, you can watch the video where I produce this embroidered and appliqued tree using a running stitch, backstitch, French knots, satin stitch and applique. I'll put the link to that below if you're interested. If you've made it all the way to the end of my video, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like, comment below and subscribe to my channel for more. See you next time.